Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. You've probably even seen in the news about Anthony Rota, who invited a Nazi into Parliament and recognized him as a war hero. Later, during the session, it was discovered that he was actually a Nazi soldier, even though he was born in Ukraine. And we've heard statements that there were thousands of Ukrainian men who wound up fighting on the side of the Third Reich during World War II. We also heard that millions, or not more, actually fought on the other side against the Third Reich. So we're going to hear Anthony Rota's apology and his resignation. Takes about a minute or two for him to do that and discuss that. By the time you're actually hearing my voice talking about his resignation, he has already resigned, and that they're well on the way to electing a new Speaker of the House of Commons. But there are other things happening in Canada that need to be talked about along with this. Not saying that something like this, an embarrassing moment for a country that is supposed to be a safe haven for democracy, isn't important. Not saying that the Holocaust and the mass murdering of the Jewish people, which, I'll be totally honest with you, both of my grandfathers managed to escape that Holocaust. It is important. Anytime someone is killed out of hatred, that is an important thing to talk about. It is important to make sure that we're standing for the side of those who want to promote love, to promote freedom, and promote those ideals that lead to the betterment of the human race. Not saying that Anthony Rota's actions are at the worst questionable. That, yeah, maybe as a nation, Canada needs to apologize to the world for allowing a system that would eventually recognize a Nazi on Parliament floor. That needs to be re-examined. All these things are true, but I also have to question that there were documents brought up that could explain who actually killed a Sikh leader in Surrey, BC. A Canadian citizen on Canadian soil who was murdered by a foreign power, according to these documents. But no one wants to really bring those documents out into the public. They're saying they're using terminology that says that it might disturb the investigation. It might taint the investigation if we talk about these documents before we get completely through the investigation, and that we've managed to try the person who murdered, or people who murdered a man. It is just as important to learn what happened to him, who it was that ultimately ordered him to be killed. What happened, and why was Najir, or I should say Hardeep Singh Najir, killed in Surrey, BC? Who ordered the order? Was it a member of the Indian government who actually said it's time to kill him? He was ambushed. And we need to make sure that we're still talking about this event. At the same time, we're talking about what is happening with Anthony Rota. He's apologized. He's resigned. He's admitted to what happened, and said that it shouldn't have ever happened and should never happen again. Should he continue to be the Speaker of the House of Commons? Maybe not. Should he continue to be an MP? Should he be thrown out of the Liberal caucus? Maybe, maybe not. Should we as Canadians, because we believe in humanity and that we believe that people can overcome their mistakes and learn, it's part of the fabric of a democracy, that a person can learn from their mistakes. It's part of a loving society that a person can learn from their mistakes. We should be offering him our forgiveness and not hang him on a cross. And hang him on a cross that actually could sweep away the facts that led to the death of another Canadian citizen, that causes a distraction so that the public can't see what is really happening, that allows our government to put up a smokescreen so that the public doesn't know what happened to a religious leader. So, with that, I'm going to let you listen to what we recorded as the Liberal MPs were going into caucus to discuss what was going to happen with the Speaker, among other things, that they say that, hey, it's a private room, we can't discuss it. There's a whole lot of things that happened in that room, or said in that room, that they can't discuss because it's private. And yet, what happens in that room and discussed in that room has a direct effect on us, the public. How do we get government to be transparent in everything that they do? How do we convince Justin Trudeau that transparency is the way to run a country? For that matter, I would hope that Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre are also listening to the fact that, yes, they need to be transparent. Tell what they're doing, what they're thinking. Ultimately, the people of Canada should be the ones to decide. Anyway, it is my opinion that, hey, Anthony Rota, while he made a mistake, they're going to use that mistake to sweep under the rug the truth of what is going on with a murder that happened by a foreign power on Canadian soil to a Canadian citizen. And maybe the people of Canada need to take up a voice and make sure that that doesn't happen. So why don't we listen to Anthony Rota's apology and his resignation, how all the other MPs have reacted to the fact that a Nazi appeared on the Canadian Parliament floor, as well as some other things that were said by Pierre Poilievre, that he is asking Justin Trudeau to make an apology himself, that he should take responsibility for what happened on the Parliament floor. Let's listen to that, and we'll be back with final thoughts.
It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons. It has been my greatest honour as a parliamentarian to have been elected by you, my peers, to serve as the Speaker of the House of Commons for the 43rd and 44th Parliament. I have acted as your humble servant of this House, carrying out the important responsibilities of this position to the very best of my abilities. Je tiens à vous remercier, vous, mes collègues, pour votre appui et votre collégialité durant mon mandat à la présidence. The work of this House is above any of us. Therefore, I must step down as your Speaker. I reiterate my profound regret for my error in recognizing an individual in the House during the joint address to Parliament of President Zelensky. That public recognition has caused pain to individuals and communities, including the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, in addition to survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other nations. I accept full responsibility for my actions. My resignation is effective at the end of the sitting day tomorrow, Wednesday, September 27th, to allow preparations for the election of a new Speaker. Until that time, the Deputy Speakers will chair the House proceedings. Thank you. Merci.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The Speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it. Je pense que c'est clair que c'est inacceptable que ce soit passé. Le président de la Chambre a pris responsabilité, s'est excusé, mais il va sans dire que c'est profondément gênant pour le Parlement du Canada et, par extension, pour tous les Canadiens. Je pense particulièrement aux parlementaires juifs, mais à toute la communauté juive d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays qui commémore Yom Kippour aujourd'hui. L'important dans tout ça, c'est qu'on va continuer de rester ferme contre la Russie, contre la propagande et la désinformation russe, tout en restant sans équivoque en appui de l'Ukraine dans cette guerre illégale de la Russie, comme on annonçait avec plusieurs mesures hier.
Prime Minister, have you thought
Justin Trudeau était responsable de l'invitation du président Zelensky à la Chambre des communes. Justin Trudeau était donc responsable de garantir le succès de cette visite cruciale, surtout pendant une guerre. Justin Trudeau est responsable pour les fonctionnaires aux affaires mondiaux, aux services de renseignement, et dans son propre bureau de protocole pour demander la liste de tous les invités qui allaient être en proximité d'un chef de guerre et aussi du discours que tous les présidents et tous les autres allaient se présenter à la Chambre des communes. Justin Trudeau est responsable pour la réputation diplomatique de notre pays. Et Justin Trudeau est responsable pour la pire catastrophe en ce qui concerne la réputation diplomatique de notre pays dans notre histoire. C'est lui qui est responsable, mais il se cache à son chalet. Depuis 3 jours, il se cache de la Chambre des communes, essayant de blâmer le président libéral de la Chambre des communes. Justin Trudeau blâme toujours les autres pour les échecs qui arrivent. Mais s'il veut le pouvoir, il doit prendre la responsabilité. Les deux vont main à main. Donc aujourd'hui, Justin Trudeau doit prendre la responsabilité pour son échec historique et s'excuser aux Juifs, aux Polonais, aux Ukrainiens, au président Zelensky et à tous les Canadiens. C'est ça que nous revendiquons comme conservateurs. Justin Trudeau was responsible for inviting President Zelensky to the House of Commons to give that speech. He was responsible for making the event a success. He is responsible for the officials at Global Affairs, the intelligence services, the Prime Minister's Protocol Office, all of whom could have and should have asked for a complete, vetted list of every one of the people who would be in the room and in proximity of a wartime leader. Every single person ought to have been vetted for their diplomatic and security sensitivities if the Prime Minister and his massive apparatus were doing their jobs. The Prime Minister is now responsible for the biggest single diplomatic embarrassment in Canadian history. And what has he done with that responsibility? He's been hiding out at his cottage. For 3 days he's hid there instead of coming to the House of Commons and taking responsibility. There's always someone else to blame when it comes to Justin Trudeau. But here's the reality. Responsibility and power go together. If he wants the power, he has to take the responsibility and come to the floor of the House of Commons today and apologize to Jews, Poles, Ukrainians, and all Canadians. Justin Trudeau, do your job. Stop hiding. Take responsibility and apologize. Thank you very much.
Est-ce que M. Rota peut rester au caucus? Est-ce que M. Rota peut rester au caucus selon vous?
C'est pas mon choix. Évidemment, c'est pour moi, M. Rota, et c'est quelqu'un très honorable. C'est quelqu'un tellement gentil. On a été élus en même temps en 2004, mais c'est évident qu'il fait une erreur majeure et totalement inacceptable. Et il a accepté les responsabilités pour ça.
Est-ce que le premier ministre doit s'excuser maintenant?
Many people have said that this was an embarrassment for Canada internationally. Does that not require Canada to formally acknowledge that and apologize as a country for what happened?
Well, first of all, let's take a step back. I don't know, and I'm sure all of you standing in front of me would feel the same, that we would give our life rather than see the darkness that was embodied by the Nazis reclaim this world. All of us are steadfast united against tyranny and oppression. And mistakes get made in this world. How we treat people who make mistakes is important. This was a huge mistake, an absolutely massive mistake that caused this country enormous embarrassment and set back the cause of democracy. There's no question of that. But I believe it was earnestly made. I don't believe that Mr. Rota set out with intention in his heart to hurt anybody. Yes, he should have been more diligent. Yes, the choices he made were poor, and he suffered a grave consequence for that. But sometimes if we focus all of our energy and attention on somebody's innocent and earnestly made mistakes, then we forget in the world there is grave evil. And right now, pushing into Ukraine is grave evil that threatens not Ukraine, but threatens democracy everywhere. And if we get lost in the thrust and party of our debate here about earnestly made mistakes that must face serious consequences, then we can also lose the bigger thread of the bigger threat and the greater evils that face us.
Minister, a great consequence in your own words. Does that not require a government response, an official apology within the House of Commons on behalf of the government for the mistake that Speaker Rota made? So, will you make that case?
Well, I understand, as all of us, I stood and applauded. I stood in my place and applauded. And for that, I am deeply sorry, personally. I feel betrayed myself that I was put into a situation and I stood and applauded something that was contrary to my values. But it seems to me that we're all extremely zealous about continuing to pursue this, when what we need to be zealous about, and I can see you shaking your head no, and I would ask you, because I'm sure you and I are aligned in the cause of democracy. I'm sure you and I are aligned in standing against autocracy. And if we're going to battle against and we're going to spend all of our time and energy fighting on somebody who has stepped down, who is an honorable gentleman.
The question was not about the Speaker, the question is about an apology.
Right.
Will the government apologize?
So as you're yelling at me,
I'm not yelling, I'm just trying to...
As you're yelling at me, okay, about what you feel the government should or shouldn't do, I'm trying to say to you that I believe the focus of this government, the focus of all parliamentarians, should be standing united. Because what is Putin doing with this? He's lying, he's manipulating, he's trying to turn an earnest mistake into something else.
Put it behind us, though, and so you can move on to what you want to talk about?
I think that the situation was totally unacceptable. And that I'm not sure what folks are after here. I mean, in the question. Let me be very clear. I said it. So let me say this, because I can only speak for me. I am the person that's in front of you right now. I deeply apologize personally. I stood and I applauded somebody who was completely contrary to my values. That made me feel disgusting. Okay, I felt awful and terrible after that. I apologize to anybody who suffered. I apologize to the Jewish community. I apologize to anybody who fought against the darkness that is. I can say to them that the core of my values is that I stand full square with them, and I would lay down my life in that cause. So I personally apologize, and I am deeply sorry. And every parliamentarian I talked to who stood and applauded that day, I know feels that way.
En français, M. Hollande, est-ce que...
Bon, le président de la Chambre a déjà fait ses excuses. C'était sa décision d'inviter cet individu. C'était sa décision de le reconnaître dans la Chambre. Et il a fait l'honorable chose et il a déquisitionné de sa poste.
Est-ce que les excuses doivent aller plus loin, pardon?
Bon, comme j'ai dit dans la Chambre plusieurs fois, c'était quelque chose qui était tellement douloureux pour nous tous comme parlementaires et pour tous les Canadiens. Le mot, c'est pas contente, mais je suis reconnaissante que le président de la Chambre a décidé de faire ses excuses et a démissionné parce que c'était la seule chose vraiment à faire pour reconnaître la responsabilité de ses actions.
Mais est-ce que ça va pas traîner?
The Jewish group's calling for an apology. The Polish embassy is calling for a broader apology, also involving Poles. Should Canada issue a more formal apology for this whole mess, not just the Speaker resigning?
Well, the Speaker needed to resign because this was his decision and the actions that he took that hurt all of us as parliamentarians, but indeed all Canadians. And so he's taken that responsibility. He has stepped down, which he absolutely needed to do, because he made a big mistake that has really hurt all of us.
Disappointing incident last week, and I think Speaker Rota has taken responsibility for the invitation, for acknowledging and recognizing the person in the gallery, and he made an honourable decision.
But does Canada need to actually apologize on an international level for what happened, or specifically to Ukraine?
I think Speaker Rota has taken the action that he felt was necessary.
Should we reopen the Deschênes report, given what has happened?
In terms of the investigation about individuals who are involved with criminality, war crimes, etc., I think what's important to understand is that there's a process in place in Canada, including at my department. We have a war crimes unit that investigates, and where enough evidence has been amassed, has the ability to lay charges and actually prosecute war criminals that are within Canada. That's important. I think you should also take guidance from the fact, and Canadians should take guidance from the fact that we've also taken a leadership role in terms of investigating war crimes that are contemporary, whether that's with the Rohingya and the incidents in Myanmar, whether that's what's going on with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. I've had direct conversations with the Ukrainian Prosecutor General about alleged Russian war crimes that are occurring.
Are you saying this is too old business? Are you saying this is too old business?
Holocaust history. Does this show that we don't know enough about the Holocaust and that we need to know exactly how many Nazis have been welcomed into Canada?
I think there's always room to learn about instances of gross human rights violations around the planet that have occurred over time. Obviously, we've invested money in terms of Holocaust awareness. We have a special envoy on anti-Semitism. Those are important initiatives. Is there more to learn? There will always be more to learn.
Do you support reopening the Deschênes report?
What I will always support is ensuring that people who have perpetrated war crimes or crimes against humanity or crimes like genocide are brought to justice.
Yeah, but are you saying this is old business? Is that...
Over the past number of years. We're going to continue to demonstrate our support through actions, not merely through words. And my sense is that we'll maintain a strong relationship with Ukraine and its war and the invasion it's facing as a result of this war of aggression.
What was the meeting here last night on the Hill? It seems there was a cabinet or caucus meeting here last night on the Hill.
There was a caucus meeting, but look, as you guys will appreciate, once I go into that room, I don't talk about what we discuss inside that room.
What's going on with Burnaby and Surrey? Should Canada formally apologize for what happened last week?
Sorry, I was just providing an answer. My view is that it's really important that we understand who's responsible for different actions. In the present instance, every indication that I have is that there was a private invitation sent by the Speaker that any considerations about the appropriateness of their attendance was a decision of the Speaker's office. The appropriate response from my point of view was an apology and a resignation from Mr. Rota. I should say Mr. Rota is an individual I have had and continue to have respect for. It's regrettable what took place. The consequences are very serious, but my sense is the appropriate response was an apology and resignation, which has taken place.
Vous êtes-vous tous coordonnés pour poser la même question?
C'est la question du jour, monsieur Duclos.
Ah ouais, mais la réponse du jour, ça va être que ce sont des questions qui appartiennent au caucus et à M. Rota.
Mais vous en faites partie, vous, est-ce que vous voulez le voir encore dans votre équipe?
Comme vous en doutez, c'est une question qui relève du caucus. Vous n'êtes malheureusement pas encore invité au caucus. Il y a quelques mètres seulement qui nous séparent, mais je dois m'y rendre.
Qui voyez-vous comme prochain président? Est-ce qu'il y a des gens que vous préféreriez?
Bon, vous allez voir bientôt, il va y avoir d'excellents candidats qui vont se déclarer comme candidats à la présidence de la Chambre des communes. Ce sera la Chambre de décider, mais on a de très, très bons candidats. Merci.
It was a cabinet meeting I wasn't at. Where was it? I was bowling with my team building for my new political team. So I can't speak for that at all.
Should the Prime Minister apologize?
Apologize for what?
For there being a Nazi in the House of Commons.
Well, look, I think this is Canada has a really dark history with Nazis in Canada. There was a point in our history where it was easier to get in as a Nazi than it was as a Jewish person. I think that's a history I think we have to reconcile. The cabinet took a decision in May of 1950 to let in members of the Glisson division. I'm sure you're all well aware of the Deschênes report. I would encourage you to read it again. It is part of that dark history that we have to reckon with. And this was just another disgraceful expression of it. As you know, Anthony was a good man, a decent man, was solely responsible for inviting that person, and he took responsibility for it by resigning. I didn't attend it, so I couldn't tell you. And even if I did attend it, I wouldn't tell you because it's private, and I think we have to decide things amongst Liberals.
But shouldn't the Prime Minister hold something on Canada? Shouldn't there be some sort of apology?
That's a question for the Prime Minister.
Est-ce que M. Rota, vous pensez qu'il peut rester, vous personnellement, vous pensez qu'il peut rester membre du caucus libéral?
Caucus, fondamentalement, je pense qu'il s'est très bien débrouillé dans ses fonctions de député. C'est un ami à moi, je le respecte beaucoup. Je pense qu'il a pris c'est une personne qui a pris une très mauvaise décision. Je ne pense pas que ça devrait être entièrement attaché à sa carrière. Mais malheureusement, ça va être les choses dont les gens vont se souvenir. Mais souvenons-nous quand même qu'Anthony Rota est une personne très décente, très respectée par le caucus. Alors moi, personnellement, je ne pense pas qu'il devrait démissionner du caucus en tant que tel.
There's been talk there, a demand to declassify some of these documents surrounding the negotiation. I don't know the details of it, but
I don't know what you guys
do that. Was that something you're considering?
Look, I did not expect at the beginning of the week to be reading the Deschênes report. I've now read it twice. There are appendices that I understand name names of people. I understand that there are many groups, including leading Jewish advocacy groups, that are demanding for the release of those names. It is something that we could possibly examine. Again, not being privy to what is in those documents. I don't have a particular view that I've fully formed on it yet. But again, in a country like Canada that has not only a difficult history with Nazis in Canada, but also one of the most important diaspora of Jewish people, including some of the largest proportions of Holocaust survivors, impunity is absolutely not an option.
Given that history,
that on this particular matter, it's very serious, and the Speaker has taken responsibility, and he's done the honourable thing, and I'm glad that he's done it.
Formally apologize for what happened in the House last week?
That's a good question. I think it's a discussion we should have in caucus.
What do you think?
I think it was extremely unfortunate, unacceptable. I think the Speaker did what the Speaker felt was the best thing to do for Parliament. I think we need to work hard to rebuild some credibility, trust. It's just an unfortunate incident.
How do we rebuild our credibility?
By working very hard, by demonstrating that Canada's democracy is alive and well, resilient, by being the role model that we are globally.
Would you recommend that Canada apologize?
I'd recommend that we have a discussion about this in caucus.
Seriez-vous intéressé à devenir président, vous?
Président de quoi?
De la Chambre?
Je sais pas, on verra.
Pensez-vous qu'il doit s'excuser, le Premier ministre? Est-ce qu'il a une responsabilité personnelle, à votre avis?
C'est une très bonne question. Je pense que c'est une question dont on va traiter ce matin. Je vais attendre d'avoir.
Mr. Poilievre said that there should be a committee to look into this. Do you think there should be one?
Is there a committee looking on this? I think the Board of Internal Economy may want to look at this. That's the committee. We may want to do it between House leaders. I think we have to come together. If we make this any more further partisan, it's just not good for our country, and it's not good for countries that are watching this country. I spent a lot of my life building democracies all over the world. I spent 2 years in the former USSR. I'm on the way to Angola in October. I take delegations all over the world. Canada is held up as a model for democracy. We have to continue to put that forward in a serious way, in a thoughtful way. That's, I think, where we ought to get to.
Réouvrir l'enquête des chaînes, qu'est-ce que vous pensez, ça, c'est cette commission d'enquête qu'il y a eu dans les années 80? Est-ce que c'est une bonne idée?
J'ai aucune idée. Je ne vais pas en penser.
Seriez-vous intéressé à présider la Chambre des communes?
C'est un poste très important, mais non. J'accorde beaucoup de valeur à ma liberté de parole, puis
Le premier ministre doit-il s'excuser pour ce qui s'est passé?
je vais laisser le soin au premier ministre de décider ce qui est bon pour lui, mais je crois que déjà c'est une bonne chose que M. Rota se soit retiré.
Est-ce que M. Rota peut revenir au caucus, selon vous?
Il y a des discussions, j'imaginais à avoir, c'est pas à moi de décider ça unilatéralement.
Mr. Oliphant, do you think the Prime Minister should apologize to Canadians for what happened in the House on Friday, that he has an obligation to apologize personally?
No. The Speaker made a horrendous mistake. It was his decision. That gallery is his gallery, and he makes the decisions about who's going to be in. He made a decision to invite a member from his constituency. It was the wrong person at the wrong time.
Should Canada formally apologize, though, like on behalf of the country?
It wasn't.
I don't think it's the country. I think that the Speaker made his mistake, and he has paid a huge price for it.
Can you tell us who you'd like to see as Speaker?
I'm not sure yet.
What qualities are you looking for?
A speaker that's impartial as usual and a speaker that serves at the pleasure of the House.
Monsieur Rota peut rester dans le caucus libéral?
Ah ben ça sera une décision. M. Rota a bien servi, il a fait une erreur, puis c'est pas, je veux pas dénigrer M. Rota. M. Rota a fait une erreur grave et la décision qui a été prise hier, c'était pas à propos de lui, c'était à propos de la chaise du président. C'est un précédent concret. C'est important quand une erreur comme ça a été commise, que ça soit reconnu pour les futurs présidents. Puis, je ne veux pas dénigrer M. Rota. M. Rota reste un homme intègre, puis je respecte M. Rota.
Do the Prime Minister should apologize?
Pardon me?
Do you think the Prime Minister should apologize for Hunka being in the House of Commons?
Look, I think the Speaker has come very clean with what happened and apologized, and I know this was something that was the choice of the Speaker. So I think he's held himself accountable, and that's important.
But what about the Prime Minister? This is, on behalf of Canada. Doesn't mean he has to take personal responsibility, but do you think he should apologize in some way?
I think that's up to the Prime Minister to do. I know it's something that's very hurtful for me to see. I think we need to constantly stand against anti-Semitism in all of its forms and discrimination in all of its forms, and take a leadership role. Pardon me?
What happened at last night's caucus meeting?
What happens in caucus stays in caucus.
Can you tell us what the topic was, maybe? Was it about the Speaker election? Was it about this?
I can't reveal what we talk about in these walls. It's private.
Ah ben, je sais pas, je vais voir qui va se présenter. Non, je suis déjà au comité des anciens combattants que je préside, donc je vais...
Êtes-vous ouvert à ce que M. Rota reste au caucus?
Ben, s'il le veut, pourquoi pas, oui, c'est son choix, évidemment.
Okay. C'est pas quelque chose que vous l'excluriez?
Ah non, personnellement, non, pas du tout, aucunement. Merci.
Merci,
Je vous en prie.
Officially on behalf of Canada, do you think that Canada should officially apologize for what happened last week, like as formally as a country?
I think certainly we have to take responsibility for the fact that there was a Nazi in the chamber. I think that the Speaker has properly taken responsibility and stepped down, but it doesn't mean that there's no responsibility elsewhere as well. It's not a question of Canada excusing itself. It's a question of Canada accepting the fact that we had a Nazi in our chamber. It's an embarrassment for all of us, and we all need to accept that as being a shame on all of us.
Is that what you're going to
Mais je crois qu'à la fin du jour, on va changer le président, mais on va aussi tous reconnaître que c'est complètement inacceptable. Il faut trouver une manière que les procédures sont faites, qu'il y a une manière qu'avant quelqu'un est reconnu dans la Chambre, quand il y a un président de notre pays-là, qu'on voit clairement, que tout le monde voit clairement qui ce personne est, qu'on évite un problème comme ça. Il faut changer les procédures.
Est-ce que le Premier ministre doit s'excuser? Est-ce que le Premier ministre doit s'excuser? Monsieur le Premier,
moi, je ne demande à personne de s'excuser. Je crois qu'on tous, comme membres des chambres, ont une responsabilité pour assurer que ça n'arrive pas dans l'avenir.
Mr. Housefather, are you going to make the case in caucus that the Prime Minister should issue a formal apology on behalf?
What I'm going to say is that we need to fix the procedures to make sure something like this can never happen again, because it's a huge embarrassment for Canada. It is totally unacceptable that a Nazi, somebody with that kind of past, is recognized in the chamber. We need to change the procedures to make sure that nobody can be recognized during a state visit without vetting them properly. I got to go in. Thanks.
Should the Prime Minister apologize for what happened inside, for there being a Nazi in the chamber? Does there need to be a formal apology from the Government of Canada other than the Speaker's?
The Speaker has taken responsibility, has done the honourable thing, and he has resigned.
Should he stay in caucus?
Interested in being Speaker? Are you interested in being Speaker?
Am I interested in being Speaker? No.
Do you think the Prime Minister should apologize for the whole Punka controversy?
I leave that to him.
What quality?
Do you think he should? Do you think he has a
I think he
responsibility?
has, hasn't he?
Officially on behalf of Canada, should Canada issue a formal apology for this? For what happened?
I leave that to our leadership to make that decision.
Minister!
Les sondages vous donnent un retard au Québec. C'est la première fois depuis longtemps que les sondages sont si mauvais. Comment est-ce que vous réagissez à ça?
Bien, écoutez, on sait que les Canadiens et les gens dans la circonscription en particulier trouvent la vie très difficile ces temps-ci. C'est le coût de la vie, le coût du logement, le coût de la vie, le coût de la nourriture.
Mais le message de M. Poilievre résonne plus que le vôtre, manifestement. Qu'est-ce que vous avez de plus à offrir?
Mais moi, ce que j'entends des gens de la circonscription, c'est effectivement qu'il faut travailler encore plus fort pour les aider à joindre les deux bouts. C'est la préoccupation la première et c'est ce qu'on va continuer à faire. On a fait déjà beaucoup. Dans ma circonscription, il y a 40% des enfants à tous les mois qui sortent de la pauvreté avec l'allocation canadienne pour les enfants. On investit beaucoup dans le logement abordable. Des dizaines de milliers de gens dans la région de Québec qui ont un logement abordable, un logement social et communautaire qu'ils n'auraient pas eu autrement. Alors, beaucoup de choses qui ont été faites, mais encore beaucoup de choses à faire.
Sur tout ce qui se passe avec Enfin, est-ce que M. le Premier ministre devrait s'excuser pour ce qui s'est passé en Chambre vendredi?
Bien, ce qui s'est passé dans les derniers jours, a été terrible. Ça a eu un impact extrêmement dévastateur sur beaucoup de gens, les communautés juives en particulier. Il y en a une petite communauté juive dans ma circonscription. Le peuple ukrainien, évidemment, souffre beaucoup de ce qui se passe avec la désinformation que le président Poutine fait avec cet événement très, très regrettable. Et on va continuer à dire...
Mais est-ce que M. le Premier ministre devrait s'excuser personnellement au nom du Canada, au nom de la Chambre?
Bien, ce qui est le plus important, c'est que le président de la Chambre s'est excusé rapidement. Malheureusement, sa décision a pris un certain temps à venir, lorsqu'il a été le temps de quitter ses fonctions. Et maintenant, mais on va de l'avant. On sait que c'est...
Est-ce que M. Rota a encore la confiance du caucus? Vous sortez d'une réunion de caucus, est-ce que M. Rota a encore la confiance?
M. Rota est un député libéral, comme les autres députés libéraux. Et il a maintenant le besoin de continuer à faire son chemin là, sur la base de ce qu'il a déjà exprimé. Mais je pense qu'il a dit et qu'il va continuer à dire qu'il est profondément désolé de l'erreur et du tort qu'il a pu faire au cours des derniers jours.
Given that Mr. Rota has apologized and he stepped down, do you think that he can still remain in the Liberal caucus?
Well, he has resigned from as being a speaker. That was a problem as a speaker. He made a terrible mistake. He admitted to that. Fortunately, he resigned yesterday. That was the right thing for him to do. And now he will be a normal MP in the House of Commons.
Can he be in the Liberal caucus? Can he return to the Liberal caucus after this kind of mistake?
That's for caucus to decide, and most importantly for Mr. Rota to decide as well. But based on what he has said yesterday, we can now move onwards for the election of the new Speaker. Thank you. Merci.
I'm sorry, are you thinking about running for Speaker?
Yes, I am. I'm going to let my name stand, and along with some really other great candidates in Parliament.
What do you think needs to change?
Well, I think we should, how do I put this? The importance of the rights and the rules and traditions of the House allow to encourage frank, passionate debates, but within a framework of making sure that we could talk to each other, because each one of the 338 members of Parliament have a right to be in the House, to express themselves and not to be intimidated, and to making sure that they can freely express themselves.
Mr. Trudeau.
Clean energy and labor. What is it? What are you going to do in this new role on this cabinet committee?
Exactly the work that we've been doing, I guess, with more of a focus. How do we square this circle? It's not an easy one.
Absolutely.
How do we make sure that workers across this country feel included in a massive energy transition? That's happening not just here but around the world. And the world's looking at us. They want us to get this right. And I'm bombarded every day, my own fault because I'm consumed with it, with just these sorts of struggles happening all around the world. And I am happy about that because I'm happy people are engaged. I'm happy governments and companies and unions are finally taking this seriously. It's going to be messy. Lowering emissions and keeping our economy not just afloat but prospering. It's going to be a messy old business. I've been on the front lines of it for years. Rarely does it make any one faction or constituency happy. But we're doing it. It's real now. It's real. So I'm delighted for the focus.
And I guess, I was going to say, are you going to take more of a focal role in terms of being an advocate for the clean energy sector in Atlantic Canada? You're kind of already doing that role.
Oh,
so
you can.
I guess you're kind of
They're so
doubling
sick
down
of me in Argentia. We're looking at monopile marshalling. We're looking at basically the foundations for wind turbines that are going to be stored there and then brought down across the whole eastern seaboard. So it's global. While Newfoundland is far away from most of the rest of Canada, it is close to Europe, it is close to eastern seaboard of the United States. What's happening in Newfoundland and Labrador right now is real. It has been within my professional life. I can't believe it. And it's because people there came on board. But that ain't easy. That ain't easy. This is a big, big long haul for this country, but we're getting there.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, so thank you for listening today, and we heard lots going on with the MPs. If you listen really closely, you probably heard a reporter actually ask what is happening in Surrey, BC with the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. You probably heard it, but there was never an answer given. Why wasn't the answer to the question? Why was the question skipped over? National security? Maybe so. We do know this, that we are supposed to be Canada a safe haven for democracy. We're supposed to be a safe haven for those who are trying to escape tyranny that is handed out by other governments. And we know that Canada should, at that point, Canada should be standing up for things that would end that tyranny. Yes, inviting a Nazi onto the parliament floor does not necessarily promote ending tyranny in the world. Allowing neo-Nazis to start a parent group in Port Coquitlam, white moms and white children, something or another. A group that is promoting the idea that if you want your children to grow up with other children like them, you should join this group. That we should teach white children to play with other white children and to snub the rest. That doesn't belong in Canada. Not a Canada that supports democracy and stands for freedom and equality, that no matter how diverse we are, that we should be allowed basic freedoms and rights. If that's the Canada that we're supposed to have, those sort of groups shouldn't exist. We shouldn't be teaching our children to hate. We should be teaching our children to love. Oh wait, you don't have to teach a child to love. You only have to teach a child to hate. Interesting thing there, that you only need to teach a child to hate. That a human being from the time of birth innately knows how to love. So let's all allow the love to come forward, put the fears aside, and let's find equality for everyone who lives in our country, our continent, our hemisphere, and thus our world. Thank you for listening today. I've been Michael Clogs. You've been listening to Policy and Rights, and I invite you to find that subscribe button so we can all stand together for human rights and equality for all. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.